at the end of the day, this is a question of what kind of society do we want to live in? And do we want to continue to live in a society that's divided and isolated and angry at each other and lonely? Or do we want to live in a society where people care about each other and take care of each other? And so in California, Governor Newsom has made it a priority to focus on service as a way of empowering people and bringing people together and saying this is going to be a priority of our state because that's the kind of society we want to live in.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us at the Commonwealth Club World Affairs this evening. I'm Dean Felk, and I'm Northern California Managing Partner of DLA Piper. I'm also a proud board member of the Commonwealth Club and author of Impact the World, the story of the new citizen statesperson. And this evening we have a great special program for you. It's the second in the series on the future of San Francisco and all the great things happening in San Francisco. And we are calling it People, Power, and Service Transforming the City. Very uplifting, right? And we're going to explore volunteerism, service. I'm talking firsthand, kind of roll up your sleeves in the trenches service, and how it can really play a role in the next chapter of San Francisco and beyond. And we have a terrific panel with us today of real doers and leaders. We want to say a special thank you to Levi Strauss & Co. for supporting this series, and we really, really appreciate their support. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists. To my immediate left, I have Josh Friday. Full disclosure, I've known Josh a long time, since he was in law school. Josh is our California Chief Service Officer, and he runs California Volunteers. He's the former mayor of Novato, and he also served in the Navy, in the JAG Corps. Thanks for joining us, Josh.
Thank you, Dean.
And Jess Blackshaw, to his left, is the former executive director of Y Corps, which we're going to hear a little bit more about this evening. She's also a board member of the Full Circle Fund, and a strategist and an advisor to the Weave, the Social Fabric Project with the Aspen Institute, which I think we'll also hear more about this evening. To Jess's immediate left, we have Vince Yuen, who is the founder, he's a community organizer, and he's the founder of Refuse. Check out his t-shirt if you can see it. Keep SF Clean. In his spare time, he's an entrepreneur and CEO, and also an MBA holder. So thank you so much for joining us, Vince. Okay, so the theme this evening that we are going to focus on really is how can service and volunteerism really play a role in transforming the city? How does it change communities? How does it build trust? And what's the role it's going to play in San Francisco and beyond? So I think with that, I'm going to ask Josh, if you would, tell me how you came to this. Give me a little bit of the personal story. So how you came to this line of work and believing in volunteerism, and a little bit about your role and what you're doing at California Volunteer.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this really important conversation, and Dean for moderating us and pulling us together. And as you mentioned, we won't say how long ago it was, but we've been talking for many years about how do we create an engaged citizenry? How do we motivate people and build a society where people want to take care of each other and want to be active? And I had a chance, as you mentioned, to serve in the Navy. I was an officer in the United States Navy and had incredible experiences deployed abroad, and got to see the power of service. And so I love that actually the name of this series is around people, power, and service, because we believe so deeply in the governor's office about the power of service and people power. And I got to see the power of service when I served in the Navy and got a chance to work with people from very different backgrounds, very different perspectives, who I guaranteed voted differently than I did, around a common mission where we got to accomplish some great things together. And I got to see how when you serve and you serve side by side, people from different backgrounds, you really come to appreciate and understand your common humanity. And so when we look at where we are as a society now, when we look at how divided we are, how isolated we are, how lonely we are, the governor was really wanting to think about how do we use the power of service to bring people together. And so he created a cabinet level position that I'm fortunate enough to be appointed to, where we are now at the state of California really leading, I think, in some exciting ways, which I hope we get a chance to dig into today, on empowering Californians to be able to come together through service and have the kind of experience that I was fortunate to have when I was in the Navy.
Thanks so much, Josh. Now, Jazz, so you come at it from a slightly different angle, and Y-Corps, as I understand it, really has focused on bringing young professionals, giving them a sense of drive and optimism and community and service. So what brought you to that? And tell us a little bit about what you've been up to.
Yeah. So starting way back, I grew up in a family that was a family of activists and very committed to service. And so I very much grew up with this idea that volunteerism and service was a good thing. And as I got a little bit older, started to realize that that's not always the case. There can be some really complicated things that happen in the world of volunteering and service, complicated power dynamics, complicated types of projects that maybe aren't doing as much good as we thought. And yet, I, through all of my own service experiences, really believed very deeply in the power of service to transform both the people who were receiving benefits and the people who were actually trying to help. And in fact, there is even more benefit, perhaps. I won't say more, I won't quantify, but there is so much benefit on both sides. And one of the questions that I really had with Y-Corps was, how do we try to lift both of those up and really make this about make service about both creating real change in a community and helping with real problems, not problems that just seem nice on the surface, and also really digging into how transformational service can be for the person who is serving. And young professionals in the Bay Area in particular, working with them, they have so much hunger to get connected to their community and to have a meaningful impact on a place. And it was one of the reasons that working with them was so powerful was that they're still figuring out who they are and who they want to be. And there's this real curiosity and interest in engaging that I found really powerful and exciting to work with.
Great, thank you. So Vince, you've got such a powerful story in terms of coming through the pandemic and what you started with your daughters and what you saw around you. And on its face, maybe you could say that, picking up trash is not the most glamorous of active, but obviously it means there's a symbolism, there's a knock-on effect. Like, what brought you to this, and a little bit about your story and what Refuse Refuse has been up to.
Yeah, so unlike Jess, I did not come from a family of service. Outside of corporate volunteer days, community service days, I was not volunteering. But through the pandemic, when I was stuck at home with my two young daughters who were 6 and 4 at the time, anyone with young children know they're driving you crazy. So I got a couple of those trash grabbers as an outdoor activity, just as another way to get them out of the house, socially distanced. And we just started cleaning in our neighborhood in the inner Richmond. And surprisingly, it really worked. And so initially I was really focused on the results and trying to organize. And so I'd quit my job and gotten some grants to do this full time. And now I've been able to help support people in organizing. Our city, thankfully, our public works departments provides these tools in this volunteer outreach program that helps you set up your own neighborhood cleanup. And through these grassroots organizers, everyone who's doing this on their own time, we've organized over 3,000 cleanups in the past 3.5 years. But visibility, getting that message out there is very difficult with the kind of media landscape where it's, the 24-hour news cycle. And so my hope is that this is something that really is so easy. It is, like you said, unglamorous, picking up pieces of trash. But what I've seen come from that is really the community building, right? And we kind of talk about that, but I've really seen it where people from different backgrounds have become acquaintances, friends, and just having that sense that you belong to something bigger than yourself. And I think, through military service, you get that, but a lot of us who don't choose that path don't often find the opportunity to create that same sense of service and community. So that's why I'm so thankful for people like you, and that our state has this, vision to create volunteerism as what I hope part of our culture. And me, I'm very much focused on San Francisco as our unique community. And I think a lot of people in their head already have that vision of, kind of progressiveness and being part of society, but I don't think our actions always follow what we have in our head. So what we're trying to do is kind of create frictionless gateway civic engagement, and nothing is easier than a cleanup. You literally just show up and pick up trash. So that's kind of the larger vision. Even though we're 100% focused on getting this city clean and keeping it clean, I think a big benefit that I didn't realize when I first started doing this was that community building and that service culture.
I love that, and I'll tell you, when I first was hearing about Refuse Refuse, I thought, number one, it's so visible, right? And when people look at some of the struggles San Francisco's had, they think about the cleanliness or what that looks like, and so I love that there's that immediate impact. At the same time, I thought about Representative Andy Kim in the Capitol, right, after January 6th, and the fact that he was on the ground. Here's somebody who is our elected leader, and he's on the ground picking up trash. It shows you what people. It shows that service can be about, it's not that it's humbling, but it's in a way subordinating yourself to a greater good in everything you're talking about. So I really applaud what you're doing, Vince. And what are some of the signs that you've seen, like that people, like, do you sometimes hear that the program has inspired them to move on to other things or to organize their own kinds of?
Yeah, 100%. So once they kind of, sometimes cleanups is the first opportunity to volunteer and to get out in the community, but then they discover other things. Now that they've made a habit of it, and maybe picking up trash, obviously for a lot of people isn't their number one priority, but now that they catch the bug, what else is there that I can do? And so all of that matters. And even though it's maybe not as visible as the cleanups that we do, those hours, that effort really goes to lift up our community. And so that's my vision, is that for California, that we lead the country in volunteerism. And so, I have some ideas about that,
We'll take them.
Civic duty, jury duty, where you get called to serve.
Yeah.
I would love to see that. So.
Okay, Josh, I want to hear, if I could, from you, because when we think of kind of grassroots organizing and people coming together, organizations like Refuse Refuse, we don't necessarily think of the government, which is like, at first glance is more of a top-down structure in some construct. So give us a sense of what it means for the government to encourage. Like, how does that work? And maybe if you could highlight a couple of programs that I was seeing, a couple of interesting ones, like the Climate Corps and some others really caught my eye.
Yeah, sure. Well, we obviously think that the government plays a huge role in creating this kind of culture that Vince is talking about, of service and civic engagement, in part because at the end of the day, this is a question of what kind of society do we want to live in? And do we want to continue to live in a society that's divided and isolated and angry at each other and lonely? Or do we want to live in a society where people care about each other and take care of each other and are compassionate? And our leaders are supposed to represent our values. And so what they choose to invest in from a budget standpoint, and what they choose to focus on in terms of messaging really matters. And I think we've seen the impact of our leaders in our country and what it's done. And so in California, Governor Newsom has made it a priority to focus on service as a way of empowering people and bringing people together, and saying this is going to be a priority of our state because that's the kind of society we want to live in. And so just to give you a quick sense, we've created the California Service Corps, which now, and the governor loves to talk about this as a talking point, is now bigger than the entire Peace Corps. And what that consists of is over 10,000 paid positions in the state of California, many of them here in San Francisco and in the Bay Area, that provide opportunities for almost every Californian to get paid that wants to get paid to serve. So a couple of the programs that we've launched that we're very proud of, just to give an example, is California was the first state to create a statewide climate corps, which we've now spread to 12 other states. And if you listened and paid attention to President Biden recently, he has talked about creating the American Climate Corps, which is based off of what we've done here in California. We also have created a College Corps program with a very simple idea. I'm a veteran, so I like to call this California's GI Bill. Simple idea. If you're willing to serve your community, we're going to help you pay for college. So we now have thousands of Californian students, a whole new generation, that are receiving debt-free pathways to go to one of our colleges if they commit to serve while they're a student. And that's serving at a food bank, that's tutoring and mentoring, that's taking climate action. So from our perspective, this is government, our state leaders, saying this is the kind of society we want to live in, where people serve each other, where people take care of each other, where people help each other, and we are going to invest real resources, real money into actually creating both the infrastructure and the opportunities. And I think what we heard just in conclusion, which is so powerful, I think, about the examples that Vince has shared with us about what he's done, is when you give people the opportunity and you give them the chance to do something to improve their community, to be connected to others, and to do something positive, people are thirsty for it. And they jump at the opportunity. That's what we've seen with our programs in the California Service Corps, and I think it's what we're seeing here in San Francisco with Vince's program.
That's great. Now, Jess, through your work with Y-Corps, you have been working with a lot of young professionals, and we know firsthand in the workplace and in the community and what we see in the media that we're in this period of incredible transformation, generational change as well, in terms of, these are generations of digital natives. We, of course, following the pandemic, the way that we work has changed, the way we interact in society has changed. So my question to you would be, what are your experiences with millennials, Gen Z? Like, how do these, younger professionals, how do they think about service, and how do they kind of respond to the fellowships programs and engaging in the community?
Yeah, I think, so when I started at Y-Corps, Y-Corps was mostly for millennials. We had our line, by millennials, for millennials. As I was there, we transitioned to being for Gen Z because the millennials grew up. And I think
we never grew up, really, but
I am still the same age. But I think one of the interesting things that we started to see, and it's a little bit hard to figure out what's generational and what's the pandemic, because those transitions were happening at the same time. But when we were working primarily with millennials, this was post-Trump election, pre-pandemic. There was a huge hunger to have meaning and to feel like you were contributing with your career, with your time, to something bigger. And that hunger was kind of ravenous. I mean, we had to keep expanding our program. We kept growing through those years into the first year of the pandemic. About a year into the pandemic, a year and a half into the pandemic, that growth stopped and started to trickle down. And the volunteers that we got in the door were still amazing, dedicated, committed, enthusiastic, but we were getting fewer and fewer. And we started to kind of articulate a couple things. One was that there was still a real interest in contributing to something and having purpose and meaning. But first, people were becoming more agnostic about what that needed to be. Volunteering in service wasn't necessarily top of mind. They might also be thinking about going vegetarian or doing some other sort of action that they felt good about, donating to a grassroots organization, getting involved with a advocacy movement. The other thing was that we were starting to see a lot of burnout, a lot of compassion fatigue, and particularly with the pandemic and a lot of the racial reckoning, it was both compassion fatigue and a sense that the problems were just too big to make a difference. And I think that's something that I saw particularly with young professionals in the Bay. I think it is a trend that is nationwide. We're seeing volunteering down across the board, especially with younger generations, and especially in places where there is significant socioeconomic disparity. And one of the things that we've been talking about a lot on our team is how do we change that narrative for younger generations, and how do we start telling a story that gives them back that power, rather than, I think, in a digital world where we have access to everything all of the time, we have access to all of the scope of all of the problems, rather than being able to look from where we are, see the trash on the street, and think about, I think the question that Josh asked about what is the community that you want to live in, that's a much more digestible question than how do I save a world that feels like it's on fire. And I think that a lot of folks in younger generations are really stuck on the scalability, the big problems, and have a really hard time seeing how they can actually create a ton of good right here where they are.
Very interesting, very interesting. Well, staying with the thread of kind of because Vince, your organization started that was born of the pandemic, but now we're sort of, so much of that is in the rearview mirror. So I would ask you, like, what are the changes that you're seeing? Are there, I mean, the need may not be as acute, but I don't know if people are, more inclined to want to come together. What are the changes? Like, what directionally, what are we seeing now as we look back from, say, 2020 or 21 in terms of grassroots activism?
Yeah, I think during the pandemic, at least for us, it was a way to get outside because everything was shut down. So ours was one of the few opportunities where you could still be outside. And people were still masking with cloth masks, as we didn't know. But, that actually helped us, I think, in many ways. Now that we're kind of back to more normal, we do see some drop off in certain types, but some of it is really stuck. And I think it is people come for the volunteering, but they stay for the community, right? They really then become friends. And, for many people, especially in the Bay Area, we're not so religious. This is their church, right? The cleanups are their church. And so that has kind of taken the place of maybe traditional communities. And I think we were chatting in the pre-meeting about this kind of idea of urban anonymity here in an urban setting like San Francisco, where there's just so many people around that everyone's a stranger, that you don't really even introduce yourself to someone who might live in your building. Whereas places like the Midwest, my wife's extended family's from Indiana, we go back there in these towns of 1,000, 2,000 people, yet there's 500 people at her cousin's wedding because they have that kind of tight-knit small community. And I would love to try to have more of that in San Francisco. And so outside of, flying in and importing a bunch of Midwesterners and good people here, I think we have to homegrown that. And I think, again, opportunities to get people to be out in the community doing something positive that's outside of themselves and for their own self-interest, or in some people's eyes, it could be enlightened self-interest, that when the community does well, you do well. I think that's my hope, is that we can continue to build on that. But it's very difficult, changing people's habits. It's very difficult. Mindset shifts, difficult, but we have time. I always tell people we act urgently, but we can be patient because, for example, I just got back from Japan, and for cleanliness, it is shockingly clean. Tokyo, similar population density, no trash cans yet. You couldn't find trash if you tried. And it's like, wow, you can see what that's like. But now they have 2,000 years head start in culture than us, and we're so multicultural.
So maybe the answer is just get rid of all the trash cans.
Or just become Japan. I don't know.
Well, you have I think because you're, where you sit in the community and you're on the ground perspective, we are all kind of painfully aware of some of the challenges in the city. But I think those of us that are longtime San Francisco, I was a longtime San Francisco resident, I'm just in the East Bay, but when we see ourselves through the lens of the national media, yes, we take umbrage to it for a variety of reasons because the city is just so dazzling and so inspiring. But we also feel like some of the nuance is missed. You're talking about kind of the social trust that's being built. Like, what is the state of San Francisco, the community of San Francisco from your perspective? Are we in a state of renewal or upswing? Are we in a I won't say it. Should I say it? Doom loop?
Yeah.
Are we doom looping? Tell me, because I feel like there's so much nuance. We're here, we've got the audience, and we'll be on public radio. So what is the state of San Francisco?
I don't know if that's the right way to look at it, right? Is it are we on some kind of graph, with a y-axis and an x-axis? I think it's just our community is what it is, right? Finding meaning where you are. And so my idea is we are the ones who are empowered to create the community that we want. And there are many things that, like homelessness, addiction. Most of us here probably think that's a much bigger thing that we care about more, but I don't feel very empowered to do much about it. Now, there are ways to do it. Whereas the trash, it's very visceral, right? You saw some trash, you clean it up, you look back, it's totally clean. So I think it's just, we create our own reality, and it's going to be what it is, whether or not people have a certain perception of it or not. So I just encourage people to kind of block out that noise. I myself am much more stoic, and I'm just I do it because that's the type of person I want to be. And then I kind of I'm okay with the results or what other people think. It doesn't affect me,
Yeah. And I like the term stoic, because I know the stoic kind of philosophy is just, if you can just improve a little bit every day, it makes such a difference. And I know there was the trend was or is make your bed in the morning to set yourself up for success. And the kind of symbolism of doing something small in the city that will create this incredible, chain reaction, I think is just so powerful. Yeah.
100%.
So Jess, okay, back to you. So you have these digital natives. Is there any tension between when you're at Y-Core, attracting? I assume you might want to attract the best candidates online and in a virtual way, but yet the change that they need to bring to the table is maybe more in a analog world. Is there any is it hard to get them to come out from behind the computer or behind their iPhones? You can't pick up trash. We don't yet have the, OpenAI for picking up trash, right? So,
Yet.
Right. If you're listening, Sam Altman,
Please put me out of business. I'd love that.
I think sometimes it's easy to discredit younger generations' desire to be in the world. I think millennials and Gen Z are people also, and they thrive on connection and they get energy from being in person. I think that there are cultural differences that are very real. It can be a lot harder to get people who are used to working from home to get out of the house. It can be a lot harder for people who are used to interacting behind screens to get over the anxiety of stepping into a room full of people. And there are perhaps different considerations. Definitely when you're talking about reaching people and recruiting people, you're going to have to think differently about how to reach people who are living a huge chunk of their lives online versus in person. But I think the reality of it is that a lot of the things that we're talking about belonging somewhere and connecting with people, those are the same. And if we can figure out how to speak a slightly different cultural language, the fundamentals, they don't change just because somebody is, grown up using Instagram or not.
And I presume that the tools themselves can be very powerful. They're organizing tools, informational, reaching people. So do you find that a lot of their projects and a lot of their community engagement, do you have examples where they've used technology in a new and interesting way?
Yeah, so a lot of our projects were focused on marketing, reaching younger generations. We helped a lot of organizations with social media campaigns, with designing strategies for Instagram or TikTok. The reality is, though, a lot of our projects were a lot more boring. A lot of them were, how do you do proper data collection? Should I be using Salesforce or not? A lot of our projects were user research. So I would say that many of our projects were tech-focused because the pool of volunteers we drew from work in tech, but they weren't groundbreaking new social media strategies. They were really basic infrastructure and capacity building projects because that's what the organizations really needed.
Very interesting. Josh, okay, so you really have, with California Volunteers, a statewide view on what's going on. If we're thinking about the role of volunteerism in San Francisco and its power to bring about change and positive change, like are there lessons that we can take from other regions? I mean, understanding that a lot of your programs are indeed the entire, span the entire Golden State. Are there some things that you've seen in Fresno or, God forbid, Los Angeles, that you think would work? Look, we haven't learned anything from them since the establishment of the state, but we're open-minded. We're Bay Area, right? So we're open-minded about it. Like, are there some lessons that we could bring here? That's the first question I want to ask you.
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, first of all, again, like I said, many of these programs that we've built, including our College Corps program, our Climate Corps, we also have a Neighbor to Neighbor initiative here in San Francisco, are happening here. So we're learning a lot from what's happening in San Francisco as well, and we are exporting those, as you would expect, to the rest of the state. Maybe I'll approach the question a little differently rather than go into specific things that maybe we've learned from others, which is to say, build off a theme that I think Jess was just hitting, which is there's something in common with all of us, no matter where we're from, no matter whether we're rural or urban, we come from a big city, a small city, we're rich, we're poor, which is we're human beings. And we have this desire, this need, this want to be connected with other people, and actually living in a community, the kind of community Vince is talking about, living in a community and collaborating with other people is actually our competitive advantage as a species, that we work together with each other. And so it's really odd that we've now live in a society where it's not just in San Francisco, it's in all throughout our country, where people are so disconnected from each other, where people feel isolated, where the Surgeon General of the United States had to recently declare a public health crisis around loneliness because people don't know their neighbors. So that is odd. We have fundamentally created a society that is at odds with our humanity. And so I think the way I want to answer your question is not to avoid it, but is to say what we're learning, what we're seeing is that when we invest in these programs, when we create these programs, when we call on people to serve, when we create the opportunity for them to serve together, people get to step into their own humanity, and they get to be connected to themselves in a deeper way, and their neighbors, and their community, and that's universal. So what we're seeing is a universality to this issue that is actually really inspiring. And we should be proud that the work that's happening in San Francisco, the work that's happening in California, is now leading the way nationally. I mentioned our Climate Corps that's spread across the country. The Governor Walz, who is now a vice presidential candidate, has recently not just created the Minnesota Climate Corps, but has also created the Minnesota College Corps based off of the California model. The governor of New York has done the same thing. We're seeing these ideas, what's happening in California, what's happening in San Francisco, start to spread around the country, I think because of the universal themes that come out when people serve and help each other.
I love that. And I couldn't help but think of the book from the 90s called Bowling Alone,
Absolutely.
Which really started, I think, to further document some of that feeling of isolationism. And so odd in a country where, de Tocqueville was saying that we are, from a European perspective, we are a people that gather together and engage civically. But it's so wonderful because as we think about ways to, more broadly strengthen our democracy, we need more. We need more civics. We've lost some of, I think some of the richness of our civics lessons. But engaging is part of that. It's part of being.
I would argue
connected.
It's the whole thing. I mean, what is democracy but trust? It's trust that we're actually going to take care of each other, that we're actually going to help each other and make decisions that are in the benefit of most of us. Trust is the fundamental bedrock of our entire democratic system. So you mentioned it earlier, when we see trust eroding in our institutions, but I would argue even more importantly and more dangerously in each other, in our neighbors, in our family members. When we start to see that trust erode, that has direct consequences on the health of our entire democracy and political system, which is why we take this stuff around service and volunteerism and helping each other so very seriously.
So Vince, picking up that thread, I mean, we're talking about how volunteerism, getting out, doing things in the community, it can have a positive economic impact, social impact, community impact, but part of it is, as Josh was saying, you're transforming from within. So have you seen what is the personal journey that maybe you've experienced, or your daughters, or some folks that, among your volunteers? Like, can you tell us, like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I can mostly speak for myself, that now that I've seen the way, I've had my civic awakening, I just look back and I'm like, I didn't have to go on that bar crawl. I could have done something positive, right? I could have done one less one, or one less trip to Tahoe. And so that's what I hope, like, for the younger generations who come, because they're the ones who are going to do it for the rest of their lives, that they incorporate that into their lifestyle. Now, it's hard because we're asking people to, change how they allocate their leisure time, right? Volunteering, for the most part, is a leisure activity. So, how do you create opportunities where when they do it, they feel so good and they're like, wow, this isn't a sacrifice. It's just substituting one great activity for another. So I think for me, it's like, wow, now that I've discovered this, like, why didn't I do this before? And so now I'm hooked, and I want to, like, infect everybody else with that same feeling. And I think people will. And that's where it's interesting, because it's like, does the society and culture wag the politics and the policy that create community, right? Or is it the other way around? Is it that top-down approach where, again, civic duty, you get called and like, oh, I got to volunteer this month. Maybe that's more of the mechanism. So I don't know, but now I'm thinking about these types of things, yeah.
But as you say, we all have busy lives, and we're we're trying to reprioritize family, work, and everything else. But yet you've you've attracted thousands of people to get involved. Like, what is, not one magic secret sauce, but how do you get people to do that? And then from the other side of it, how can we find time in our busy lives? Like, how would you encourage us to, to give up that bar crawl or that?
Yeah, I think to some of, especially Jess's point of like how our lives are so digital now, and like we're in that, and it's like, oh, it's 11 a.m. I got a couple hours to scroll on my phone still before I ruin my tomorrow. And it's like, well, maybe you can sacrifice that time and put it into something that is more beneficial, not only for the community, but for yourself. And I think if we just increase those hours, you will see a huge difference, because there's so much opportunity to really affect change for a lot of the problems that we have, that a lot of people think and kind of pass the buck. Is like, I pay my taxes, I vote, I'm good. But it's like, that's table stakes. What else can you do? And so it's different for everybody, because some people are in a more advantaged situation where they can give more. Some people, my dad, he had a stroke 5 years ago. He's not going to come pick up trash with me. But so many able-bodied people can do something. So my saying recently has been like, what good is privilege if you don't use that privilege for good? And so there's a lot of people with a lot of privilege, especially here in San Francisco, that really aren't stepping up, that I think can.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. Okay, Jess, that's a good lead-in for the Weaver program.
Yeah.
And some of this, it touches on the isolation feelings that we're trying to address. I think it touches on social trust. And it's you can also tell us maybe a little bit about how, since you are seeing a nationalized model, or at least a nationalized data set, what we can maybe bring back here to our community.
Yeah, so for context, I've been working for the past 9 months on this specific project with the Aspen Institute's Weave the Social Fabric project. And their mission is to heal our divided nation by empowering local community building, and really working with the people that they call weavers, who are weaving their communities together. And the project I worked on them specifically was on helping them design and build and bolster a national volunteer database that was focused on specifically weaving style volunteering, so relationship-based volunteering opportunities. And that was paired with the launch of their social trust map, which is actually a very cool tool if you want to check it out. I believe it is trustmap.org. And you can go on and put in your neighborhood and actually get specific social trust data for that neighborhood. And this kind of ties in with a lot of what you were saying earlier, Josh, is there is specific data for every zip code in the US about the infrastructure, so the spaces that people have, parks, coffee shops, areas to gather, for behaviors, whether people show up in a civic-minded and collaborative way, and intentions, whether people believe that their neighbors actually have their best intentions, have good intentions for them. And it's really interesting data because you can go in there and see where your community ranks on each of these levels. And what Weave has done, is created a composite of stories of different types of weavers in different communities. And part of my work with them was talking to a lot of these weavers to get them onto the database. And the thing that I found most exciting and most inspiring talking to these weavers across the country is that they are a lot like Vince. They saw something in their community that they wanted to fix. That was really about the type of world they wanted to live in. It wasn't necessarily going out and finding a nonprofit or coming from a place of like global consciousness. It was really like, I want to know my neighbors, or I really see that this is something that I want to change. I want my streets to be cleaner and to have a reason to go outside. And they've created these incredible initiatives that have grown beyond them, that are serving different people in their communities and creating communities of mutual aid and care. And I think that that is something that is so easy to understand, but is sometimes hard to get up the initiative to do. But I think that that's something that an area like San Francisco in particular can benefit so deeply from, because I think, going back to what I said earlier, sometimes we get stuck in this high level of, well, I can't solve the housing crisis. No, but you can meet everybody in your building, and you can talk about maybe what you guys want to do together to improve your street and your block. And that is what is changing the country, and that is what can change the Bay Area. And to everything that you said, Vince, that is what is going to spiral out into more and more engagement over time.
So is part of it having channels and a platform to share best practices and inspiration? Like what can we take away to kind of help ignite? I mean, gosh, when I think of San Francisco, I've been in the city. I moved to San Francisco 30 years ago for the first time, and I was astonished by the level of organizing and, yes, sometimes protesting. And, I never think of San Francisco as a place that has any want or paucity of desire to change. But I don't know if that's still the San Francisco of today. I presume it is.
I don't know if I can speak to that on a high level, but I think, Josh said something earlier about when you give people the opportunity, they jump at the bit. And one of the things that we saw a lot with Y-Corps was people would come to us saying, I'm so glad I found you because I didn't know what to do. And I think that there are things that we can do both in terms of storytelling, so lifting up the stories of people who can be examples for other folks for things that are, easy to step into, and publicizing all the types of opportunities. There's not a single database for volunteer opportunities in San Francisco. There's not a place where we can go and say, hey, I have 2 hours a week and I really care about reading. Right. I think there may be some creativity that we can leverage there. If anybody wants to start that website or that database, to just give people ideas for how they can get engaged and give them those opportunities.
Thank you. That's great. Now, Josh, you did open the door. I just came back from a political convention in Chicago. I know you did too. I know Josh did, because every time I turned on the TV, he was actually there. So his passes and seats were clearly much better than mine. But you opened the door. You talked about Governor Walz and some of the concepts. If Americans might be wondering how much California they want to reach the rest of the country, and what parts of California. We know that we're a forward-thinking people. We know that we bring, world-changing, life-changing innovation. But what kinds of other things do you think we can offer as we bring more California across the country and beyond? Like what kind of, in terms of the volunteerism that you're seeing, what do we have to offer?
Yeah, I think this is an area where we are going to hold our head high, and we're going to continue to share and tell the California story, because what we are building and what we've built in California is extraordinary. And so I mentioned a couple examples. Our Climate Corps, we're going to keep spreading to states around the country. We're going to keep helping other states. We created Climate Corps to answer the question, not one, what could people do around the existential crisis of our time, climate change? How can people actually be involved? But also to send a really powerful message to Californians, which is that the answers, and this is something that we believe deeply, the answers to most of our challenges and problems are not going to come, and don't tell politicians this, are not going to come from Sacramento, and they're not going to come from City Hall. That's the beauty of a democracy. They're going to come from us, but we have to empower people, and people have to feel like they can actually be part of the solution, which is why we created the Climate Corps. We're going to keep spreading that. We're going to keep spreading our other programs. The Neighbor to Neighbor program, I think, has an opportunity where we're investing in bringing neighborhoods together to build the social fabric, to build the connections. I think we see a desire for this. At the same convention you were at last week, President Obama said in his speech, and took the time in prime time to share that he believes that most people in America actually want to live in a society where we care about each other and where we help each other and where we take care of each other. And so that's what we're leading on here in California, and I think those ideas are going to continue to spread in a big way, and it's something we should all be very, very proud of.
I gave him a softball, so he hit it out of the park, of course.
Appreciate that, dude.
But it's so Vince, back to you. Where do you see, like, what's the next evolution for you? I mean, not that there has to be, not that what you're doing now is impactful, and we're seeing the kind of knock-on benefits that you've described and the scaling. But like, what should, as grassroots kind of, not activists, but as grassroots kind of service organizers, like what is the evolution? Like what is your?
I think it's just one person at a time, right? It's like, we will be the results of what we put out there. And so it's just getting people involved and being empowered to make it easy for them, because to many points, it's like, they don't know what to do. But I think, especially in San Francisco Bay Area, we feel it inside, but sometimes we're maybe too busy sniffing our own progressive liberal farts to actually get out there and do something. So
can he say that word on the air? Okay.
But I just like
4
to
letters,
see people act the way that they already feel. So that's what I feel in San Francisco. It's hard, you don't have to convince too many people that this is a good thing and that you should be doing it. It's just, can you convince them to change their habit? Because there's a lot of inertia of the way that we live our lives that it is hard to switch from one thing to another. And like Netflix and Hulu are awesome. I mean, HBO Max, you can spend a lifetime on these things. But can you turn it off for a bit to come help out? And I think for most people, the answer is yes, but I don't know the secret sauce of convincing them how to do it.
Okay, so the first in this series was on, of the future of San Francisco, was on partnerships and collaboration. So I'm wondering if anybody wants to try to tie together how this kind of grassroots, the civic engagement, the service, the kind of bottoms-up service, how that ties together. So anyone wants to tackle that?
I mean, I'll just state probably the obvious, which is it's foundational. This doesn't work without partnership and collaboration. Creating a culture of service, creating a culture of volunteerism where people take care of each other requires collaboration across the board. I'll just give you one example. Our California Service Corps, for that to work, for us to deploy literally thousands of Californians in these paid service positions to serve their community, requires us to work with thousands of nonprofits. and school districts and food banks and organizations. And it's that partnership which is necessary in order for people to actually connect. So from the federal government to the state government to city government to nonprofits to school districts to neighborhood associations to for-profits where we need, and we're launching a program called Core to Career where companies are now stepping up to say, we value those who have served in their community and we're going to hire them because we know the skills that they've learned about working with other people and collaborating and communicating and showing up on time. We value that. We need everyone in society. This is a moment and a time, and I think in our history and in our political and cultural reality where we need everybody. And that's the only way that we come together as a country and we move forward as a country.
And how do you measure impact? Obviously, I don't know if you're measuring the economic impact of what you're doing. And so that, because not every government is willing to invest the way that we invest in our communities. So if we want to spread this, I don't know, to red states or wherever, what have you, how do you measure impact? Like, what are the metrics, or do you fall back on the economics of it? Can you say that every dollar spent produces tax receipts, or how does that work?
You can, and there's lots of research that shows the economic impact of volunteering and what that means and the ROI to a community. Where we see impact is we're graduating an entire new generation of Californians with less debt because they serve their community. And which we know if you graduate with less debt, you're more likely to be an entrepreneur. You're more likely to take economic risk. You're going to be more economically productive afterwards. We're also seeing the impacts in the community. The fact that we are not only providing thousands of tutors and mentors for our low-income kids who have been disproportionately impacted by COVID and learning loss from COVID, but we're now inspiring a whole new generation of teachers, people who now, because they have experience in the classroom, want to go into education, and we're able to address the teaching crisis where California now faces a shortage of over 10,000 teachers. Wow. So we're tracking the impact of this, and all it does is continue to reinforce to us that we have to invest in this work. It is critical to invest in creating these kinds of opportunities.
That's great. Thanks, Josh. Okay.
Can I just, before we move on to Q&A,
please.
I just want to double tap on that last part about investment, because I think when we start talking about partnerships, it's really easy to talk about how great collaboration is and not talk about the fact that partnerships involve money, and we need money in this space. It is really hard to fund this type of civic engagement organization because it's harder to measure impact. Impact is over a longer period of time. It's not necessarily getting foods in mouths tomorrow. It's about investing in a longer type of community that we want to live in. Nonprofits in the Bay Area are struggling. These types of nonprofits in the Bay Area are struggling more. And when we talk about partnerships, especially if we're going to talk about partnerships with for-profit organizations and across sectors, we need to be talking about how we can get money into this space to support this type of work.
Excellent point. Okay, so we are going to turn to the Q&A segment. Question number 1. What role, if any, do you feel service and volunteering can play in narrative change? Narrative change, changing hearts and minds on issues like homelessness, criminal justice, or the like. Any examples of service programs changing perspectives? Who wants to pick that one up?
Well, I mean, ours is like, empirically it works, the cleanups do. So places that we clean monthly, we typically see at least a 25% reduction in baseline trash levels. Places we clean weekly, it can be 75, 80% plus. So, I mean, again, the reality will change the narrative. I mean, people can cherry pick. You can go down to parts of the Tenderloin and Soma and say, wow, this is the apocalypse, look at this. Or you can go to Golden Gate Park or to Fort Point and look out and be like, wow, this is the most beautiful, cleanest place I've ever seen. So it's the truth lies somewhere in between that. But I think, again, we create our own reality and it is going to be what it is. So we just have to get out there and do the work.
But I mean, should we be thinking about PR also? Because when you have a great reality, doesn't it, don't spin it, it speaks for itself?
It speaks for itself, I mean, people can think what they're going to think. I mean, I just want to be truthful about the situation and live as close to that as possible, and that's what we're trying to change. I don't really care about other people's perception of us here in San Francisco or California. Like, we should hold our heads up high. We're doing good things here. People just don't know about it as much.
Josh?
Here's where I think service and volunteerism can play such a critical role in narrative change and changing perceptions. And I think about it, Jess brought up belonging earlier, which is something that we're talking more and more about how to create a society where everyone feels like they belong. When you're not part of something, when it's not your team, when it's not your city, when you don't feel like you're part of something, it's very easy to be critical of it. But when you feel like you're part of something, when you belong, whether you're part of a unit in the military, whether you're part of a school, whether you're part of a city, when you feel like you're part of it, you have stake. You have agency, you have ownership, and it changes how you feel about the pride you feel in your community. And one of the interesting things about belonging and feeling part of something, and John Powell at the Other End Belonging Institute at Berkeley talks about this very, very compellingly, one of the key components of belonging is the ability to contribute. And so by having the opportunity to contribute to your society, to feel like you can actually shape your community, whether it's your neighborhood, your school, your city, that just the act alone of being able to contribute creates a sense of belonging and a sense that you're part of something, which I think changes for all of us, every single one of us, how we think about the world around us and can make it a much happier, better, and welcoming place to be.
I love it. Okay, next question. What are some good tips for motivating people to take the first step to action?
Alcohol is a good one. We do a lot of happy hour cleanups. That brings people out.
We write that down.
Yeah. Food and drink. But I mean, people don't stay for that. They stick around for the belonging, for being part of the tribe, to contributing. I mean, that's real stuff. That's like a dopamine hit when people do that. So it's I'm interested. I want to learn more. Like, how do you get people to try it? How do you give free trials and not make it feel like I'm selling timeshares? Like, come and volunteer, you know?
People are suspicious. They think you have ulterior motives. Like,
yeah, I mean, some people might think you have some other kind of like political maybe motivations for maybe what you do, but I think service really should be above that. It's just, we don't screen people for what their political beliefs are when they come and pick up trash. So I think that, you know, you were touching upon it, Josh, in like military service, and it's like, you're the unit. It doesn't matter who they are, where they came from, what class they are, what their background is. You know, that's your brother or sister, and you're going to watch their back no matter what. So I think we can do more of taking those kind of values and bringing it back into civilian life as well.
okay, I'm going to pair that with this next question, which is, how do we make service and volunteering cool?
That's the $1 million question. I just had a conversation with the Full Circle Fund staff about that last week. It's hard. But I think a lot of it, I mean,
It's not inherently cool? It's not intuitively cool?
It's okay. Here's my thinking about this. And I don't know how true this is. This is just me speaking on what I think. But I think that sometimes I think where we are right now is that we've lost a little bit of the mutuality of volunteering and this sort of sense of exchange and it being for me and it being fun and it being this like part of belonging. And when we use a word like charity that has become kind of loaded, it becomes this obligation that people have to put forth and this thing that maybe somebody does out of guilt because they feel like they have too much privilege or they have to contribute to something. And it's not that that isn't true, but I think that we need to bring back some of the collaborative, fun, innovative parts of it to start to tell that story more, because that is a huge part of what service is.
Taylor Swift picking up trash.
I was just thinking that.
about.
You just
Yeah.
get Taylor Swift out there. That'll bring people out. Yeah. We try. I mean, we try to like.
Maybe
So
other people.
we've been partnering with Hunter Pence.
Is that
a
right?
baseball player, yeah, because he's been involved in the community. And so I was like, oh, how do you bring people out? And it's like, and I'm from LA, Pasadena, and you know, what is it there? It's celebrity, and like we live in such a celebrity culture. I'm like, well, who are the celebrities in the Bay Area? We have politicians, I guess, and athletes. So I tweeted at him, and some back and forth, and finally he came out and like really put us on the map because people follow that. So I think to make it cool is like you get cool people that do cool things and volunteer, right?
Good answer. Okay. Josh, this one might be for you. Can government make it even easier to have time and capacity to serve? The reserve model? Question mark. Encouraging paid time off for service? Question mark. Can local city government pilot this?
So I love that question because the answer is an emphatic yes to all of it. Let me give this quick example. And it's important that city government, local city government was identified here. The College Corps program that I talked about that is now spreading to other states, that is providing debt-free pathways for thousands of Californians who serve while they're in school, started off as a pilot when I was mayor of Novato, where we teamed up with Dominican University and said to send a message to students in high school. If you graduated from one of the Novato high schools and you served for 2 summers with the city of Novato, we'd pay you during the summer. And then if you got into Dominican University would give you a $100,000 scholarship. Wow. Which is basically a full ride. Now, it was a small program, but the point was this, is that if there's a desire to send a message that we want our kids to serve and we want people in society to serve, we can find the resources. It's about political will. And this is where I think every single one of you, every single one of us, every single person listening plays a really critical role, which is we should be expecting our leaders, who we elect to represent us, to want to invest in creating the opportunities for people to be able to serve, because that's the kind of society we want to live in. And whether it's our school districts who can help create service learning programs and provide credit to those who serve while they're in school, academic credit, whether it's our mayors or city council people who can create programs at their city level, or it's our governors, or it's our president. We should be expecting our leaders, like Governor Newsom has done here in California, to invest in a really big way, because we've shown that it makes a difference and it can change societies and it can change people's lives.
Okay, Jess, this one might be for you. This is a little vignette. Coming here, I was at the traffic light when I saw 4 self-driving vehicles awkwardly moving their way. What do you think are existing tensions or opportunities for harnessing the tech ecosystem towards a culture of service? Oh, actually gave her name too. Okay.
I don't know if there was an additional
Oh.
thought from the audience. Great question. I think prior to the pandemic, I think tech was thinking a lot more about service and volunteerism. There are a number of tech companies that actually have pretty robust service programs and community engagement programs, or had. I think those faded a lot during the pandemic. I don't know how many of those have come back. I think it's I don't know if I have the answer to that question. I think about it a lot. I think a lot of it has to do with the money issue that I brought up earlier, is how are we asking these types of organizations to invest in our community as community members? How are we expecting the young tech professionals who are coming to the city to engage with their communities? Things like, where are they buying their lunches even? But I don't know. I think it's a really hard question. And if anybody has any answers or better ideas, please let me know.
But like the well-documented efficacy of social platforms and bringing people together for really virtuous activities or less virtuous activities, or things like GoFundMe, where you're finding resources from near and far, sometimes again to drive some kind of social benefit, sometimes to give that pub crawl that Vince is talking about. It's like, are these, there are certainly more tools available than there were just a couple decades ago.
Definitely, but tools are only good if people are going to use them. And there are plenty of crowdfunding platforms out there. I've used 8 or 9 of them, and they're all fine. But if nobody's actually on there using them to fundraise, and if that culture doesn't exist, and I think that question of culture change can be a really tricky one. And I think the tech world, for a whole host of reasons, has not been one that prioritizes community investment. And I think that that's something that I hope we can change the narrative on, or at least put some pressure on.
So for our remaining minutes, do we want any remarks? I mean, we want to end on a positive note, give us a spring in our step and motivate us to do more in our communities. Any? I'm going to let Josh finish it off, maybe Vince, because
Yeah, it's just about action, I think kind of that tech, I think a lot of us in the tech world, right, think that all the problems can be solved with a great app or something, right? But it's like, no, we still live in a very analog world, and it's going to take, at this point in time of evolution, like boots on the ground, getting out there and doing the work, connecting on a human level. So I don't know how we get around that. Now we can leverage the technology that we have to enhance maybe what we're doing. And so now, it's kind of a blessing and a curse with social media and digital platforms. It's much more easy to get the message out there, but because it's so easy, you have to cut through all the noise of all the other distractions and things that are out there.
True.
So that makes it very difficult too. So yeah, that's a challenge.
Jess, parting thoughts for us?
Yeah, I think similarly, I don't think our problem is one of the tools and the platforms right now. I think it's the content. And so if there's a takeaway, a soundbite, it's be the content, tell whatever platform you are on, wherever the people you are living and talking, talk about it, talk about the issues, read articles together. I think the more that we can make engaging in our communities a collaborative, collective thing and not something that feels far off, the more that we're going to start to change the way that we think about service.
Josh, bring us home.
You're very kind. Well, first of all, I'm a little bummed that we have established that service is not cool inherently, as the Chief Service Officer for the state of
What's
California.
cooler than
So
this?
We're
I mean,
going to
come
change
on.
it. But I'll finish with this. First of all, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, this platform, this series to talk about the connection of people, power, and service. And I'll just end with the simple message, which is we need you. We need everyone out there who's listening. We need every Californian to step up. If we're going to solve our big challenges, whether it's climate change or homelessness or poverty, we need you to step up in a big way, either as a volunteer, as a service member to join one of our programs, as a business owner who's willing to create opportunities for your employees, as a local leader, or as a voter to push your elected officials. We need your help, and I'll just finish with sharing one quick story. I was recently with a young woman, a student who went through our College Corps program, and she said to me, I came to college because I wanted to be able to get a job and make money. And because I did College Corps and had a chance to serve my community, I now have found my place. And I found that I want to serve for the rest of my life. And at a time when I think so many of us want to find our place, service gives me hope that we have a path forward. So thank you.
I love it. I love it. Let's give a warm round of our applause to our great panel. Thank you so much for joining us here and online and at home. I'm supposed to remind you that the third in our series of the Future of San Francisco will be held here at the Commonwealth Club on September 25th, focusing on the latest initiatives for sustainable and natural environment. So please do save the date. And if you want to engage in future programs or support the Commonwealth Club, you can look for us at commonwealthclub.org. Thank you and see you soon.